Greetings to everyone. This is Germane again. As you know, we've been presenting this journey through the Galactic Heritage Cards series for you. And as we say in every video, it's of the most benefit to watch the videos from the beginning because the information is cumulative. So if you can, we offer them to you. All right, so the last video then, we were talking about some of your forefathers and their entrance into fourth density. This is parallel to where humans are right now. If there are new viewers here who don't understand what we mean by third density and fourth density, we'll just tell you very, very briefly that it's a scale that we use that talks about physical evolution of a civilization. So third density is a very separated young species, very focused on the external world and not really remembering who they really are and where they've come from. As a civilization begins to enter fourth density, the parts of themselves they've separated that they've not wanted to deal with, they begin inviting home, so to speak, into an inner integration, and they begin waking up and remembering who they are as part of a greater whole. But the transition between these two states of consciousness is, or can be, intense for most species, and therefore it's always part, let's say, of galactic responsibility for older species to guide younger species through this transition. So in the last video we were talking about your Sirian forefathers and their connection with you in terms of the fourth density transition. So this video we're going to talk about another of your most prominent forefathers who assisted you, and that is the Pleiadian civilization as you know them to be. All right, so we are then going to talk about the Pleiadian civilization within what we call second era. On the cards, it's referred to as present time stream. Second era is when a civilization is starting to mature and moving into fourth density, beginning to heal themselves. All right, so the first card we have here then for the Pleiadian civilization is card number 63, and the theme is seeking karmic balance. We could probably talk a lot just on this card, but we like to make these videos somewhat short so we don't lose your attention, yes? So we will condense for now. The idea of karma, though, is something that we do have to address before we go forward, because the old idea of what karma is, even in your biblical texts, was eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So if you kill someone in one lifetime, you have to be killed in another lifetime, things such as that. It's not quite as clear-cut. The best way that we can describe what karma truly is that it is unfinished energy. For example, we give a very simple example. Let's say you are happy with no negative intention and you have a pair of, you have a vegetable knife in your hand and you trip and you fall and you kill someone with the knife. It was 100% of what you would call accident on the physical plane. So the first question is, do you get karma from that? No, you do not get karma from an innocent and neutral act. Where the karma comes from is the result of the action. So if you start to go into a guilt cycle or a self-hatred cycle, then you start creating unfinished energy. And until you work through that emotional journey that the action took you through, you will continue to bring to you other situations that are connected to the original issue as a way for you to eventually free yourself from the energy attachment, which of course usually comes down to forgiving oneself. All right, so that is where karma comes from. It's unfinished emotional energy. All right, so if we're talking about karmic balance then, with the Pleiadian card here, we've just been talking about number 63 and how the Pleiadians were seeking this, then it brings us to the idea of Pleiadian civilization in their second era when they had entered fourth density. One of the issues, or one of the motivations, let's say, for them in their growth was to address this unfinished energy, emotional energy that was creating karma for them, or repeating patterns in their interactions with other beings. Now, if you go back to the first era Pleiadian, if you remember that video, and for those of you who haven't seen it, you can go back and look at it. We were talking about some of those deep, deep emotional wounds of the Pleiadians, one of which was guilt. Okay, so guilt and their other stuff, let's say, was part of what they had to really work with on this deep level as a new fourth density civilization in order to free themselves from the karmic cycle. So once they started to understand truly what karma is, they then were already really on the path of freedom. And that's one of the most important messages we have for you regarding this card, is that when you start to see that karma is entirely self-imposed, when you see that it is your own cycle of unfinished emotion, then that realization begins to set you free. So if you've gotten this card in your reading, yes, it could mean, of course, that there are Pleiadian beings assisting you, but it's also an invitation for you to begin untangling, let's say, those repeating patterns and experiences that you might see created in your life, and instead of externalizing the understanding of them as something out there, begin to see that they are a reflection of that unfinished emotional energy inside. This was one of the keys to the Pleiadians as they moved into fourth density, becoming free and an awakened civilization. So this is the start of it. And we know probably most of you watching this video have already started this. So congratulations. Keep going, and also understand that it's not a linear process. We've known a lot of people in the past that kept little charts about different lifetimes in chronological order and how this one affected that one. It's not linear like that. It is a very holographic process. So what you work with then is what is showing up in the moment. And when you do it that way, the whole tapestry is eventually addressed. All right, so good luck. Now, up until this point then, the Pleiadian civilization, as you saw in the earlier first era, were very mired in their own wounds and their own drama, if you wish to say that, just like every civilization. But as people and civilizations do this deep inner work that we were just talking about with the karmic balance, and they begin to heal themselves, then a big shift begins to happen. The ego no longer becomes self-focused. It no longer becomes distracted by its own drama, let's say. And that brings us then to card number 64, because what then happens when the ego begins to relinquish its attention on itself, so to speak. That brings us to number 64, devotion to service. And again, it's Pleiades, present time stream, second era. Now, within third density reality, you often see many people who are devoted to service. However, very often in a third density reality, that devotion to service is actually a reaction from a deficit one is feeling within oneself. The service is a way to make one feel better or to make one feel more healed, and very often does not address the original wound. So it's kind of a way to fill the wound without actually healing the wound within a third density reality. However, as you move into fourth density reality and you start doing your inner work, as we've been talking about, then, and as we've just said, when the ego no longer becomes as self-focused as it has been in the past, what arises naturally, what is naturally born from that state of consciousness, is the overflow of joy to help others. And it absolutely no longer comes from a way to make yourself feel better or a way to fill the void or to fill the wound. It comes from an overflow of gratitude for what you have learned, and thus the compulsion, almost, if you will, to share it with others in a loving and non-intrusive way. So if you have gotten this card, Devotion to Service, in your reading, again, it could mean many things. You have to use your intuition there. But it's also an invitation for you to go within and to find the greatest lessons that you've learned that have healed within you. Feel the gratitude and feel the joy, and let that begin to, in a sense, bubble up, so that when a situation arises that is natural for you to share your wisdom through your experience, through service, that you are there and available to do so. So remember, it comes from, the true devotion to service comes from your own healing and your own joy, which leads to a very natural process. So take a look at that within you. Everyone has this available to them as the ego becomes less self-focused. So right now, all of this is in transition. Maybe some of you are there yet, maybe some of you are still on the way. It really doesn't matter. And if you're judging your ego, maybe you're not yet there yet, and that's okay. Just let it play out, just keep watching. But that is the path. This is the path for the Pleiadians when they made a huge shift in their civilization. Their service to humanity and their service to other civilizations happened or began differently at this point, because their consciousness shifted. What they could give humans shifted as well. So this is a big doorway. All right, next we have number 65, refining galactic lineage. Now we know there's been a little bit of unclarity about this sometimes with some people, and we will invite you to take a look at the web page, which will be noted on this video, because the card of the month in the library section recently, somewhat recently in 2017, there was some more information written about this card, so you can take a look at that to augment your understanding. But basically speaking, when we talk about refining galactic lineage, it has to do with you beginning to access and call back the different parts of yourself that have previously been cast asunder, if you will. Now, as we said in third density reality, it's very common to see everything as separate pieces. And as you move into fourth density, you then begin to recognize that the Pleiadian energy, the Sirian energy, the Arcturian energy are all aspects of you. So when we're talking about galactic lineage, then we're talking about really beginning to have an understanding that all of these different galactic pieces of yourself are mirrors of you. And that when you understand this, when you understand and relate to the guilt of the Pleiadians, as an example, or the challenges of the Orions, as an example, that you are basically looking at a shard of a mirror that is showing you another reflection of yourself. And when you bring that part of you home to yourself, then what you are doing is in a sense, igniting the hologram of who you really are. And this is how the galactic lineage is refined. Because there are many, many, let's say, threads of evolution. For instance, you know, you see the human evolution on Earth from the monkey or the ape man or whatever you want to call it, all the way up to meta-humans, as we like to call them. But there's also a thread of evolution that has to do with consciousness that goes from the very beginnings of Lyra all the way to the end of the story, if you are to map it out linearly. That is what we have done with the cards here. We have tried to separate the story in a linear way, in such a way that you can understand it. But basically, the whole story is the refining of your galactic heritage. So when you get this card then in a reading, we would recommend that it's telling you to look at the bigger picture, that there are other parts of you in other realms who have had the same challenges as you, maybe slightly different, and you can benefit from their wisdom. And by accessing that, somehow, it doesn't have to be by knowing the story fully, it can be simply by feeling the energy, that you are then drawing into you those shards, those previously fragmented shards of the hologram, so to speak, and you're beginning to build the puzzle or build the hologram, sense the hologram, embrace the hologram. That's what the refining of the galactic lineage is all about. So it's more of an energetic experience than it is a mental one. And we know most of you, if you're watching this video, you pretty much already know how to do that. Just focus on the energy. The basic understanding is okay. But again, as you go into your shadow parts, the process automatically happens. Okay, finally then we have number 66. Again, Pleiades, second era, present time stream. The theme is sharing cultural ideals. Interestingly, this that card is actually the card of the month in, what month is this? September of 2017. So you can go and read more in the library section of the website about this card, if you will. But basically, this has to do with the idea of every civilization beginning to embrace who they are as unique fragments of the whole. Now, if we look at the microcosm of this, and you look at humans on your world, in ancient times, the idea of conformity and community was very important because of survival. But as survival no longer became such a difficult issue, then you all began to feel your innate individuality, yet there is still pressure to conform. So the card has to do with how when a civilization moves into fourth density, the invitation is there for the civilization itself, but also the individuals within the civilization to begin to express who they naturally are without reservation on the physical level. Now, this is kind of a paradox, because maybe you're thinking, well, Germane, we thought you were saying as you move into fourth density that you come together, that integration happens, not that you become more separated. That's the paradox. You cannot ever really go to the place of reunification if you first don't embrace the individual natural part that you are. So therefore, as paradoxical as it sounds, in order to get to the whole, you have to first totally embrace the unique, quirky person that who has shown up in this life, so to speak, who wants to be expressed. Now, of course, when we say that, we're not talking about ego expression. We're talking about natural expression, who you really are at a fundamental core level. If you begin to let that out and embrace it, you're going to find how your reality shifts and how actually it helps you connect with the greater whole. Because when you have a society full of balanced individuals, there's a common thread that runs through them, and that common thread always leads back to the one. So this is another way the Pleiadians healed themselves, is that they eventually stopped trying to be their Lyran forefathers, so to speak. They stopped comparing themselves to other civilizations that they thought were more evolved, and they simply allowed themselves to be who they are. And this was also a turning point for them. It will be a turning point for humanity too, as well. Right now you're seeing big waves where sometimes humanity is embracing the freedom of expression of who people are, and then it punishes them, and they go back and forth, back and forth. That's very, very normal for a species that has entered a fourth density reality. Again, it will balance out. So if you have gotten this card in your reading, then we would say that while, of course, it may refer to Pleiadian energy working with you, it's also an invitation for you to begin to let yourself feel more comfortable in your own skin. Whatever color, shape, weight, height that skin is, it doesn't matter. And we're not just talking about skin either. We're talking about who you are underneath that skin. Let it out as much as you can. Little by little is okay. But the longer you push down who you really are, the longer and longer you actually stifle this process of awakening we were just talking about as you move into fourth density. So it's a little bit of a push or an encouragement that it may be time to step out. Well, we used in the article on the website, we used the term "let your freak flag fly." So it might be just time to start unfurling that flag as a way to move back to the one, as paradoxically as it sounds. All right, so this was the journey of early fourth density for your Pleiadian forefathers, and that wisdom they learned is beneficial to you as well, now that you are an early fourth density civilization. All right, so we will have another segment coming up soon, and take a look for it. Meanwhile, for now, as always, we send you much love.